thud. I went crashing to the floor in the middle of the restaurant lobby. Gasps rippled through the crowd, but then came the laughter. Sharp, muffled, vicious. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught Melissa, my sister-in-law, her lips curved in a triumphant smile. She had stuck out her foot, and I had fallen right into her trap. I could feel every stare, every mocking whisper pressing down on me. My cheeks burned as I scrambled to my knees, wishing the ground would swallow me whole. Melissa leaned down just enough for me to hear, her voice dripping with venom. "You can't even afford this dinner, you trash!" she taunted. Then she smirked and switched to English for the kill shot. "Maybe you should stick to McDonald's next time." If you're watching this, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this story ends, because what happened next made my sister-in-law's jaw hit the floor harder than I just did. Let me back up and tell you how a woman everyone thought was a clumsy nobody became the owner of a restaurant empire worth $47 million. Growing up in small-town Nebraska, I learned early that money talks and poverty whispers. My single mother worked 3 jobs, cleaning offices at night, serving lunch at the diner, and doing alterations on weekends, just to keep our trailer park rent paid. I wore thrift store clothes with pride, telling myself that character mattered more than designer labels. But kids can be cruel. At school, I was trailer trash Sophia. When I got a full academic scholarship to Northwestern, my guidance counselor pulled me aside and said, "Don't let them see where you come from. Fake it till you make it." Those words burned into my memory like a brand. College was brutal. While my roommates ordered takeout without thinking, I survived on ramen noodles and the occasional splurge of a McDonald's dollar menu burger. I worked in the campus dining hall during mealtimes, serving food to students who looked right through me. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was literally feeding people who acted like I didn't exist. That's where I met Michael during my junior year. He was everything I wasn't. Old money, East Coast family, parents who casually dropped $50,000 donations to the university like it was pocket change. But he seemed different. He noticed me. He saw me. Or at least, I thought he did. When Michael brought me home to meet his family for the first time, the temperature in their Park Avenue penthouse dropped 20 degrees. His mother, Victoria, looked me up and down like I was something unpleasant she'd stepped in. His sister Melissa didn't even bother with subtlety. She literally asked if I was there to clean something. "What do your parents do, dear?" Victoria asked during that first dinner, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "My mother works in food service," I replied. Technically true, but carefully edited. The look that passed between mother and daughter spoke volumes. I was temporary, a phase Michael would outgrow. After Michael and I got married, a small ceremony his family barely attended, the slights became a steady drip of humiliation. Family gatherings were exercises in endurance. Melissa would make comments about my discount store outfits. Victoria would forget to invite me to family events, then act surprised when Michael showed up alone. The worst part? Michael said nothing. Every single time. "They just need time to warm up to you," he'd say, his face buried in his phone. "You're being too sensitive." But I wasn't imagining the way Victoria would seat me at the far end of the table, or how Melissa would talk about expensive vacations and charity galas, making sure to emphasize how exclusive everything was, or the way they'd discuss Michael's ex-girlfriend Caroline, the one from a good family, right in front of me. The breaking point came during our 3rd Christmas together. Melissa announced she was getting engaged to her boyfriend Derek, a hedge fund manager. The celebration lasted for hours. Then, almost as an afterthought, Victoria asked about our plans. "Well, we'd love to start a family," I said carefully. Melissa laughed, the sound sharp as broken glass. "Good luck affording childcare on Michael's teacher salary." She turned to her mother. "Maybe Sophia can get a job at that diner her mother works at. Keep it in the family." The table erupted in laughter. Michael stared at his plate. That night, lying in our cramped studio apartment, I made a decision. I was done being their punchline. I started planning my exit strategy the next morning. Not from my marriage, not yet, but from the suffocating weight of their expectations and condescension. If they thought I was poor, uneducated trailer trash, I'd show them what trailer trash could accomplish. I'd always been good with numbers thanks to helping my mother manage bills and budgets since I was 12. I'd majored in business administration with a minor in hospitality management, partly because I'd spent so much time in restaurants growing up, not as a customer, but watching my mother work. The restaurant industry wasn't glamorous, but it was something I understood from the ground up. I knew how to stretch a dollar, how to manage inventory, how to treat staff like human beings instead of disposable labor. Most importantly, I knew what it felt like to be invisible, and I swore I'd never make another person feel that way. I took out student loans, more debt than I'd ever imagined, and enrolled in a culinary business program. Michael thought I was going through a phase. His family didn't even notice. While they were busy planning Melissa's $80,000 wedding, I was working 18-hour days, learning everything from food cost analysis to staff management to health department regulations. I waited tables at night and studied during every spare moment. The hardest part wasn't the exhaustion or the stress. It was the loneliness. Michael became increasingly distant, more aligned with his family's view that I was having some kind of breakdown. "Why can't you just be happy?" he'd ask. "We have enough." But enough for him meant being grateful for scraps. For me, it meant building something that could never be taken away. My first restaurant was a tiny breakfast spot in Queens that I bought with every penny I could scrape together, plus loans that kept me awake at night. Sophia's kitchen served working-class families the kind of hearty, affordable meals I'd grown up craving but rarely getting. The first year almost killed me. I was cook, waitress, dishwasher, accountant, and janitor all rolled into one. My hands were permanently stained from cleaning grease traps. I smelled like bacon grease and coffee grounds, and I'd never been happier in my life. Michael visited exactly once. He took one look at me in my stained apron, hair tied back with a rubber band, and said, "This isn't you, Sophia. This is beneath you." But it wasn't beneath me. It was me, for the first time in years. The restaurant started turning a profit after 8 months. Word spread about the quality of the food and the fact that I paid my staff above minimum wage with actual benefits. Local food bloggers started noticing us. Then came the write-up in the Queens Tribune that changed everything. "Sophia's kitchen doesn't just serve food, it serves dignity," the reviewer wrote. "This is what community dining should be." Within 2 years, I had a waiting list for weekend brunches. Within 3, I was looking at potential locations for a second restaurant. Michael's family still had no idea what I was actually doing with my time. To them, I was playing with a little hobby restaurant in the wrong borough. Perfect. By year 5, Sophia's Places had become a small chain of 7 restaurants across New York's outer boroughs. Each location maintained the same philosophy: excellent food at fair prices, staff treated with respect, and an atmosphere where families like the one I grew up in felt welcome. The money started rolling in, but I lived like I was still scraping by. Same small apartment, same practical clothes, same careful budgeting habits. Michael assumed the restaurants were barely breaking even because I never changed our lifestyle. What he didn't know was that I was reinvesting everything back into the business and squirreling away the rest in accounts he'd never seen. By year 7, my personal net worth hit $8 million. By year 10, $23 million. The restaurants kept growing, and I kept flying under his family's radar. The irony was delicious. Melissa would make comments about my cheap purses while I was sitting on more liquid assets than their entire family combined. Victoria would lecture me about contributing to society while I was employing over 200 people and had just established a scholarship fund for kids from single-parent homes. Michael knew I was successful, but he had no idea how successful. To him, I was just doing well with my restaurants. The full scope of the empire I'd built? That was my secret. Then came the invitation that would change everything. "Mother's 65th birthday is coming up," Michael announced one evening, not looking up from his laptop. "Melissa wants to throw her a big celebration at Le Bernardin." Le Bernardin? The holy grail of New York fine dining. The kind of place where a dinner for 20 easily runs $4,000 before wine. "That sounds lovely," I said carefully. Are we contributing to the cost? Michael shifted uncomfortably. Well, Melissa's husband is handling most of it, but she mentioned that, it would be good if we could cover our share. Our share of a Le Bernardin dinner would be roughly 400 per person. For Michael and me, that meant $800, more than our monthly grocery budget. I could see the trap being set. Melissa was orchestrating this specifically to humiliate me. She knew exactly what she was doing, picking the most expensive restaurant in Manhattan for a family celebration, then making sure I'd be expected to pay my way. The old Sophia would have made excuses, maybe claimed I was feeling sick. The old Sophia would have found a way to avoid the situation entirely, but I wasn't the old Sophia anymore. Of course, I said, smiling sweetly. I'll take care of our portion. Michael looked relieved. He had no idea what he'd just agreed to. I made a phone call that night to the general manager of Le Bernardin, a man I'd met at several industry events over the years. We had a very interesting conversation about birthdays, family dynamics, and the art of perfect timing. If they wanted to play games, I was ready to play. If you find this content interesting, please like and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss other interesting stories. The night of Victoria's birthday, I dressed carefully. Not too fancy, I didn't want to spoil the surprise, but nice enough for Le Bernardin's dress code. Michael wore his one good suit, the one we'd bought for job interviews 3 years ago. We arrived at the restaurant to find the entire Whitmore clan already assembled. 32 people, 3 generations of old money and new money and inherited money, all gathered around a series of tables arranged in a private dining room that cost more per hour than most people make in a week. Melissa air-kissed me with theatrical warmth. Sophia, so glad you could make it. I was worried this might be outside your comfort zone. Not at all, I replied. I love celebrating family. Victoria, resplendent in what I recognized as a 3000 Chanel jacket, accepted my carefully chosen gift, a beautiful vintage cookbook I'd found at an estate sale. How thoughtful, dear, she said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. The dinner progressed exactly as I'd expected. Multiple courses, each more elaborate than the last. Wine pairings that cost more per glass than most people spend on an entire bottle. Extended discussions of country clubs, private school tuition, and summer homes in the Hamptons. I sat quietly, answering when spoken to, playing the role they'd cast me in years ago. The poor relation, the outsider, the one who didn't belong. Melissa was in her element, regaling the table with stories about her recent trip to Tuscany and her plans to redecorate their Westchester house. She made sure to pepper her monologue with casual mentions of price tags and exclusive boutiques, but the real show started when we headed to the restroom together during dessert service. That's when Melissa made her move. As I walked back toward our table, passing through the elegant main dining area, I felt something catch my ankle. I tumbled forward, my arms windmilling as I tried to catch myself before hitting the marble floor with a sickening thud. The entire restaurant went silent. Crystal stemware stopped clinking. Conversations ceased. Every eye in the place turned to watch me scramble to get back on my feet, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. Behind me, I heard Melissa's voice, dripping with false concern. "Oh my goodness, Sophia, are you okay? You really should be more careful in those cheap shoes." But her tone carried just enough smugness that several nearby diners shot her disapproving looks. She'd overplayed her hand, and everyone could see it. I brushed myself off, my dignity bruised, but my resolve stronger than ever. Because what Melissa didn't know was that this little stunt was about to backfire spectacularly. I was about to respond when I heard footsteps approaching. Gerald Morrison, Le Bernardin's general manager, appeared at my side with the kind of genuine smile reserved for valued clients. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said warmly, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent dining room. "I'm so sorry about your fall. Are you hurt? Should we call for medical assistance?" The color drained from Melissa's face. Gerald's use of my married name, Blackwood, not Whitmore, created the first crack in their certainty. "I'm fine, Gerald," I replied, my voice steady. "Thank you for your concern." "Excellent," he said, his professional demeanor never wavering. "I wanted to personally congratulate you on the opening of your Chicago location next month. The industry is buzzing about Sophia's places expanding to the Midwest. You could have heard a pin drop in the restaurant's main dining area. Other diners had started to take notice of our conversation, whispers rippling through the room. Gerald continued, oblivious to the family drama he'd just detonated. I trust everything has been satisfactory this evening. I know you prefer to handle payments personally for family celebrations. Absolutely perfect as always, I said calmly. Please charge my personal card on file for the full amount, including a 25% gratuity for the staff. They've been exceptional tonight. Gerald beamed. Wonderful. I'll take care of that immediately. And Mrs. Blackwood, we're all very excited about the Forbes feature next month. Well-deserved recognition for what you've built. So, as Gerald departed, I walked calmly back to our private dining room, where the silence was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Melissa had gone completely pale. Victoria looked like she'd seen a ghost. Michael stared at me like I'd suddenly grown a second head. Finally, Melissa found her voice. I don't understand. Sophia's places? Personal card? What is he talking about? I took a sip of my wine, savoring the moment I'd been building toward for 10 years. He's talking about my restaurant chain, I said simply. 17 locations across New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, with the Chicago expansion launching next month. We're projecting $52 million in revenue this year. Victoria made a sound that might have been a gasp or a cough. But you work at a diner, Melissa stammered. You're poor. I smiled, the expression genuine for the first time all evening. I've never worked at a diner, Melissa. I own diners. Along with cafes, bistros, and 2 full-service restaurants, I employ 340 people, and last month I was featured on the cover of Restaurant Business magazine as one of the top female entrepreneurs in hospitality. Michael was staring at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Sophia, what are you talking about? We live in a studio apartment. We shop at discount stores. We don't have any money. You don't have any money, I corrected gently. I have plenty. I just choose to live simply because I remember what it's like to go without. But simple living and being poor aren't the same thing. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, quickly accessing my banking app. I turned the screen so the immediate family could see the account balance, $28,743,291. This is just my personal account, I explained conversationally. Business accounts are separate, of course. Melissa made a choking sound. Victoria clutched her chest dramatically. You're lying, Melissa whispered. This is some kind of joke. I opened a different app, the one that controlled all my restaurant locations, and showed them the real-time daily revenue figures streaming in from each location. Today's total so far, $47,382. The breakfast rush at our Manhattan location alone brings in more than most people make in a month, I said. Queen's location is having a particularly good dinner service tonight, actually. I paused, looking directly at Melissa. And as for being clumsy with cheap shoes, these are $800 Louboutins. I just don't feel the need to announce the price tag of everything I own. Uncle Robert, Victoria's brother, who'd barely acknowledged my existence for a decade, suddenly leaned forward. My God, Sophia, I had no idea. We had no idea. That was intentional, I replied. I've found that people's true character comes out when they think you have nothing they want. The implications of that statement hit the table like a physical force. 10 years of condescension, dismissal, and outright cruelty suddenly took on a very different context. I stood up slowly, my wine glass in hand. I'd like to propose a toast to Victoria on her birthday. She raised a son who taught me that I could never depend on anyone else to value me. And she raised a daughter who showed me exactly the kind of person I never wanted to become. So, in a way, this family has been instrumental in my success. I raised my glass higher. To the Whitmores, thank you for motivating me to become everything you believed I wasn't. The table remained frozen as I took a delicate sip of wine that cost more per ounce than their monthly cable bill. Melissa's face had gone from pale to flushed to an alarming shade of purple. This is impossible, she hissed. You're lying. Show me proof. Real proof. I set down my wine glass and pulled out my business card holder. I selected a card and placed it in front of her. Sophia Blackwood, founder and CEO, Sophia's Places Restaurant Group. Then I opened my phone's contact list and called Gerald back to our table. Gerald, would you mind confirming something for my family? They seem to have some questions about my business. Gerald appeared within seconds, his professional smile intact. Certainly, Mrs. Blackwood. How can I help? Could you tell them a bit about Sophia's Places? I think they're curious about the scope of our operations. Gerald's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. Oh, absolutely. Sophia's Places is one of the most impressive success stories in New York hospitality. Mrs. Blackwood built the company from a single location in Queens to 17 restaurants across the tri-state area. She's revolutionized affordable dining while maintaining exceptional quality standards. He turned to address the table directly. What many people don't realize is that Mrs. Blackwood also owns the building that houses our competitor down the street. Plus, she's a silent partner in 3 other high-end establishments in Manhattan. Her business model has been studied at Cornell's hospitality program. Victoria's hand was pressed to her chest as if she were having difficulty breathing. Gerald continued, warming to his subject. She's also incredibly generous. The Blackwood Foundation provides culinary scholarships for underprivileged students, and her restaurants have one of the best employee retention rates in the industry because of their benefits packages. Thank you, Gerald, I said softly. I think that covers it. As Gerald departed, Melissa slumped back in her chair like a deflated balloon. I can't. Understand? I finished for her. Let me help you. 10 years ago, you decided I wasn't worth your respect because I came from poverty. You made that decision based on my clothes, my background, my mother's job. You never once considered that poverty might teach someone valuable lessons about hard work, resourcefulness, and treating people with dignity. I looked around the table, making eye contact with each family member who'd participated in a decade of casual cruelty. You assumed that because I didn't flaunt wealth, I didn't have any. You mistook quiet confidence for insecurity. You confused humility with shame. My voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath it now. The truth is, I could have bought and sold most of you several times over for the past 5 years. I could have ended every snide comment, every condescending remark, every deliberate slight with a simple bank statement. Michael finally found his voice. Sophia, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell us? I turned to my husband, the man I'd once loved enough to endure years of humiliation for, because I wanted to see who you really were. I wanted to know if you'd stand up for me when you thought I couldn't protect myself. The answer to that question hung in the air, unspoken but understood by everyone at the table. You never once defended me, I continued quietly. Not when your sister called me trailer trash. Not when your mother forgot to invite me to family events. Not when they made jokes about my mother's job or my thrift store clothes. You sat there and let them treat me like I was worthless. Tears were streaming down Michael's face now. Sophia, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was a coward. Yes, I agreed simply. You were. I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila envelope I'd been carrying for weeks, waiting for the right moment. I placed it on the table in front of him. Divorce papers, I explained. Already filed. The studio apartment is yours. I purchased it in my name before we married, so it was never marital property. Consider it a parting gift. The table erupted in shocked exclamations, but I held up my hand for silence. I'm not doing this out of anger or revenge. I'm doing it because I finally understand my worth, and I refuse to accept less than I deserve anymore. I stood up and smoothed down my dress, a simple black cocktail dress I'd bought at Nordstrom Rack 2 years ago, but which I now wore like armor. The bill for tonight is taken care of, obviously. Victoria, I hope you enjoyed your birthday dinner. Melissa, I hope you learned something valuable tonight, though I somehow doubt it. I picked up my purse and turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Michael? That teaching job you're so passionate about? The new library wing and computer lab your school built last year? Through my foundation, the Blackwood Foundation for Educational Excellence, I've been one of their major benefactors for 3 years. You might want to update your resume accordingly." I looked back at Melissa one final time. "And Melissa? Next time you want to trip someone, you might want to make sure they don't own half the restaurants in the city first." The aftermath was exactly what you'd expect. Phone calls, emails, text messages, voicemails. Michael, desperate and panicked, camping outside the restaurant buildings I owned, begging for a chance to explain. Melissa swinging wildly between apologies and accusations. Victoria suddenly interested in getting to know her daughter-in-law better. Far too late. I ignored them all. Instead, I focused on what came next. The Chicago expansion was just the beginning. I had plans for Boston, Philadelphia, maybe even Los Angeles. The Forbes feature Gerald mentioned would bring opportunities I'd only dreamed of. More importantly, I finally felt free. Free from the weight of their expectations, their judgment, their casual cruelty. Free to be exactly who I was, a successful businesswoman who'd built an empire from nothing, who employed hundreds of people, who gave back to her community, and who would never again apologize for where she came from. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Michael kept the apartment as promised, but also kept the $40,000 in student loan debt I'd been quietly paying down. I kept the business, the other real estate investments, and my self-respect. Melissa's marriage to her hedge fund manager imploded 6 months later when his fund collapsed under SEC investigation. She reached out then, suddenly interested in my advice about starting over and building something meaningful. I sent her a list of entry-level positions at my competitors. Victoria sent a handwritten letter on her monogrammed stationery, apologizing for any misunderstandings and hoping we could start fresh as family. I had my assistant send a polite reply thanking her for her note. The truth is, I don't need their apologies. I don't need their recognition or respect or inclusion in their world. I built my own world, one that's bigger and more successful and infinitely more meaningful than anything they could offer me. But sometimes, late at night in my new penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, the one I bought in cash, the one that costs more per month than Michael makes in a year, I think about that moment at Le Bernardin, the look on their faces when they realized everything they thought they knew about me was wrong, the scrambling, the backpedaling, the desperate attempts to rewrite history, the sudden respect that appeared the moment they learned about my bank account. It would be easy to say it felt good, and it did, in a way. Justice served cold at exactly the right temperature, but mostly it felt like freedom. I learned something important that night. You don't owe your family your dignity. You don't owe them your dreams or your success or your forgiveness. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who refuse to see your worth. The girl who got tripped in that restaurant, she was done apologizing for taking up space. The woman who walked out? She owned the whole damn world.